everyone, I'm Yuga, and as you know, as a subtrack of BTC, The Bridging Stars is an interview show which is about career. I interviewed many successful people in various industries, spreading their stories to inspire the youth globally. Today, we are honored to have the guest Michael Choi, who acts as the Chief Business and Strategy Officer at CStone Pharmaceuticals. Let's explore his amazing career journey. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Yuga. Nice to meet here. It's my pleasure.
CStone Pharmaceuticals is a top Chinese biopharma, and as a Korean American, you have worked here for almost 3 years. Do you have any unique knowledge learned?
Yes, I think it's been a really wonderful experience working at CStone. As you know, China in the last 6 years or so, 6-7 years, has experienced a tidal wave of growth in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. I think there was a study from McKinsey that came out that came out in 2016, that the number of publications in scientific journals coming out of China surpassed the United States and Europe for the first time, which means that a lot of the early innovation and discovery is happening in China, which makes a lot of sense because, I think the commitment to education, in the culture, especially in the sciences, in the STEM field, right? And just, the general population, the number of people there that are doing this kind of research, now you see the fruits of that. And so, with this big tidal wave of innovation and corporate development coming, out of China, it's just incredible to see, how much, discovery and, new projects are coming out of that region. And so, I grew up in New York City, and for somebody from New York, you almost think it's the center of the world, right? And anytime you go somewhere else, you come back to New York and you say, wow, I'm glad I saw that, fun place on vacation, but, New York is really, the biggest, best city in the world. And in 2019, I went to Shanghai and I was just blown away with how advanced everything was, how big the city was, just the scale of everything. And so that's been a really interesting experience. And I think it's been a real pleasure working also with my colleagues that are located in China. There's, cultural differences, right? Which I think are sometimes can be challenging, but also are sometimes very rewarding. And just their commitment, right, and their work ethic. It's been just a really, really pleasure to work with them.
Yeah, I find that it's really good to explore other places. While you're born in one place, it's good to embrace other cultures and learn about them, right? So could you share an outstanding example of a successful global transaction you made in the healthcare sector that involved facing challenges because of the geographical distance? And what were your key strategies?
Yeah, I think the best example of this would be during my time at Pfizer, right? So, Pfizer is a global company, and CStone's a little bit easier because CStone mostly operates in China, although that should be changed this year. And so we've done a lot of deals with European companies and American companies that want to commercialize their products in China, right? And so, that's a very simple deal where the real only issues are the time difference between the United States and Europe and in China. But we know that geography, we know that country, right? See, when I say we, I'm saying CStone. And so we take their assets and we commercialize it in China. So that's a little bit straightforward. When I was at Pfizer, I worked on a lot more global type of transactions. One in particular was a antibiotic drug that came out of a company called Basilea. They were located in Switzerland, and we did that deal for all of Europe and for China. And so that was really complicated because, Switzerland has a specific, even though Switzerland's in Europe, each country in Europe has a different healthcare system, right? They have one regulatory system, but when it comes to pricing and reimbursement, which sometimes can be more challenging than the regulatory process, each country is different. And so you have to coordinate all of the different, pricing and reimbursement and commercial strategies across each country, so that you maintain some level of consistency, right? You don't want to have one strategy in one country and another strategy in another country. And then, of course, outside of Europe, you also had the China portion, which again is a completely different country with a different regulatory system, that require different types of patients maybe in the trial. And so we were bringing that product out into China and coordinating across 30 or so countries, just to make sure that they all align together, that all of the analysis done in each country is wrapped up into a bigger whole analysis. Projects like that can be quite challenging.
I see. That's very interesting. Based on your experience in various companies, what is your advice for graduating students who are trying to find a job?
So this is a great question, right? And I think this really is important to think about. You'll hear many different things from different people, right? And I don't think necessarily anything is wrong. It's just what's right for you. One of the things that I always have, something that I always like to challenge is people say you should try to do what you love, right? I don't think that's necessarily true, because when you're like 15, 16, sometimes you're pretty much making decisions that may affect your whole career, right? You're starting with the college application process, but that determines like what that college is known for, right? If you go to like MIT or Caltech, right, you're probably going to be some sort of engineer. But if you go to another school, another good school, maybe Brown or one of the more liberal arts oriented schools, right? Maybe it's completely different, right? Political science or whatever it is. And so those decisions that affect your career start when you're 14 and 15, right? But when you're 14 and 15, the things you love are not necessarily the things you're going to love when you're 30 or 40, when you're spending most of your time in your career. Certainly not when you're 50, when you have a family and all that stuff, right? And so if you told me to do what I loved when I was 13 or 14, 15 years old, I probably would have gone into like video games or comic books. It's like that's what I loved as a kid, right? And believe it or not, when I was in business school, at between 25 and 26, I interned at a video game company and at Marvel Comics, right? And I realized that those careers are not for me, right? But I think one thing that I consistently had throughout my whole career was a curiosity and a passion for healthcare, right? Like everyone, and I think it's very easy to do that, because no matter who you are, how old you are, unfortunately, you always see the cycle of life, right? You experience, death at a very young age, maybe of grandparents or friends, relatives or whatnot. You see sick people all around you. And I always, and I certainly had that experience myself and with my family. And I always thought, it's really unfair that this person has this, affliction, right? Like, but it's, and what can I do as somebody that can try to help them? And that passion or that curiosity or interest in just helping sick people get better, that's something that hasn't changed, throughout my whole life. Mm-hmm. And so even though when I was young, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer and make artificial, limbs and implants, that changed, later on in life to being, wanting to go into biology, eventually trying to, thinking about going into surgery. So I worked at the Department of Surgery, but then I transitioned over to business, and I started to, think about how I could help build companies, with healthcare. And then finally, I'm at CStone because my mom passed away through pancreatic cancer, and I wanted to work in cancer at a cancer company. And I was able to find this job at CStone. And so I think the best career advice I could find is find something that's a noble cause that will help you get out of bed in the morning, right? With even though you're sick or you're tired, maybe if you love skiing, you don't want to ski on a rainy, bad day, right? But if you're committed to or passionate about, healthcare or any other cause, if those days where you don't want to got to get out of bed, that passion, right, that's going to get you out of bed, right, and that's going to motivate you throughout your whole career. And that passion or curiosity about a specific subject, that can be something that will consistently be with you throughout your life. So try to really find out what that is and pursue that.
Yeah, so if you have a primary purpose of trying to save people and help people around you, then that really acts as a motivation into to do well in your jobs and to be positive about it.
Absolutely. That's the perfect word, actually. And thank you for saying that. Try to find your purpose or what you want your purpose to be. And I think most people can find that very early in their life. And then that purpose will always be there. It may be, it may manifest itself a little bit differently depending on where you are in life. But the most important thing is trying to find that purpose.
What steps did you take to join a big company like Pfizer and stay there for a long period of 8 years?
So another great question. And when I joined Pfizer, and of course, Pfizer is one of the biggest and most prestigious pharmaceutical companies in the world. So it's very easy to be like, why did you want to work there? Because it's Pfizer, right? It's like the Harvard of pharmaceutical companies, or we're definitely one of the top schools, top companies. And so I was working at another company in California at the time. I wanted to move back to New York. So I applied to Pfizer and I found a job that I thought would be a good fit for me. And, I was never a big company guy, but when I joined Pfizer, I started to understand how large corporations work and the advantages of working at such a large corporation. Like the example I gave earlier of trying to coordinate a deal across 30 different countries, right? So, and 3 different time zones. And so, when I joined Pfizer, I was learning so much about how corporations make decisions, which is not always logical for somebody that's not inside the corporation, and sometimes even for the person in the corporation, unless you're part of the core team. But I was really learning a lot about that, and I was getting so much international experience. When I joined Pfizer, I was mostly focused on the United States, but then they moved me to working on Europe, and then they moved me to working in Japan. Then I expanded outside of Japan to include China and the rest of Asia, and then it added Latin America. And so I was going all over the world, trying to achieve my purpose and learning so much about different countries and how they do things. And eventually what I thought was going to be maybe a 2-3 year stint turned into a 8.5 year stint. And so, yeah, that's the main reason why I stayed so long. And it's been a fantastic experience, and I would recommend that to anybody thinking about I would recommend not shying away from large corporations to anyone thinking about their career choice.
All right, on to our last question today. How do you get along with your coworkers based on cultural differences, as you mentioned, and personal opinions?
Yeah, I think I get along with them very well. I love working with my colleagues at CStone. It's been by far the best work experience that I've had. I think what I bring to the table is somebody that grew up in an Asian environment, right? So my parents are from Korea. I'm first generation Asian American. So I was born in Seoul, but I moved to the United States when I was 1. But most of my development years were in the United States. So I have the influence of the Asian family, but I also have the influence of the Western culture. And I think that's very similar to probably you and many of the other people that are members of BTC. And so I think it's been very easy for me to adapt to the culture of CStone from a ethnic culture perspective, right? The things that I love about CStone are the work ethic, the respect, right? That people show one another, the general alignment of all of the values. and and this is an extremely hardworking company where everyone is, and also it's a as you mentioned very early, it's one of the top biopharmas, so you attract top talent. And so when you have smart people, motivated people that are kind and respectful of one another, it's really easy to create a good corporate culture. And that's what happened at CStone. I think in terms of the challenges, obviously there's time difference, and there's also corporate culture differences. Right, and so like the United States has a very strong corporate culture of collaboration in between companies, and that's just part of the whole culture in the United States, right? I guess the major capitalist country where if it works to if there's a way to work together to do things, we should do that, right? I think the corporate culture in China has always been different, especially in pharmaceuticals. You had a bunch of scientists, you built a wall around them, and then you tried to do what you can within your own group, right? And it probably stems a lot from the familial, the culture of the country, where it's very family oriented, and it's more insulated, right? And so Chinese companies are not used to working with other companies as partners. They're used to working with other companies as vendors. So like, for example, if I need, somebody to run my IT, I outsource to that, right? But, you just tell them what to do, you pay them, and they provide a service. It's very different than doing a partnership, which is more like a marriage, right? Like somebody has certain functions, you have other functions, right? Responsibilities, and you have to work together in order to achieve your goals. And so, I think that's the part that's been challenging, but because CStone has been, most of the people at CStone have Western experience, it's a little bit less so, but that's one thing that I've noticed. But we're doing well in that aspect as well.
That's good to hear. I'm glad that you're having a good experience at CStone Pharmaceutical. Yeah, so Mr. Choi, thank you for coming into our interview today. I learned a lot about your experience in various companies as well as your insights in them. So thank you so much.
Sure, it's my pleasure.